Lance, the most aggressive weapon in Monster Hunter world. It combines the biggest suite of defensive options in the game with low animation time combos and a surprising degree of mobility. When played effectively, it becomes a weapon that basically never stops hitting a monster. But how do you maximize the damage on your Lance? Well, I'm JinJinx.
And I'm Tuna.
And we're the Monster Hunter Math Guys. And this is Monster Hunter Meta Lance builds.
In this video, we'll be going over a few of the new Kjarr builds as well as the KD Claw build. We'll also be giving a bit of insight into guard levels.
I also want to apologize for the 2-week hiatus we took from making videos. I have been dealing with a lot of personal stuff the past 2 weeks that has made it difficult for me to actually work on the channel. I will endeavor to be more transparent about this kind of thing if it ever comes up in the future. Regardless, thank you so much for your continued support, and we have plenty more videos coming very soon. So let's talk guard levels. The important guard level breakpoints are 0, 1, 3, and 5. Guard 2 is basically equivalent to guard 1, and guard 4 is basically equivalent to guard 3.
A breakpoint is a level in which you don't suffer big knockbacks from particular monsters. This means that the monster's strongest attack won't give you such heavy knockback that it cancels or heavily delays your ability to use a follow-up attack. Let's start with guard 1, because you can use guard 0 for any monster not listed. For guard 1, you want to use this for the Diabloses, Vaal hazak, or if you just want reduced stamina reduction in general. Playing with guard 0 means you have to be somewhat careful about managing your stamina if you don't want to get guard broken from absorbing too many hits.
For guard 3, this is for Behemoth, Jho, and also Tio if you want the run to be comfier. Running lower levels of guard against Tio does risk guard break if he happens to be particularly spammy. Finally, guard 5 is exclusively for Arc-Tempered Call to Wrath. However, the ATKT sets are wildly different from normal sets, so we will not be covering them in this video.
As for guard up, it's not always relevant. All it does is make certain unblockable attacks like Teo's Supernova or ATXeno's mouth lasers blockable. Most unblockable attacks are fairly easy to dodge or mitigate on their own, but 3 monsters that we believe you should be able to run it on are Behemoth, ATKT, and ATXeno. All 3 of these are the only monsters that have unblockables that can be fairly difficult to dodge.
And a thank you to 2D and Wedgewood over on our Discord server for putting this list together. So onto the builds. As always, we are using the standard attack buffs on our build cards, and these are the meta sets, aka most effective tactic available. Unfortunately, this does mean that they may use rarer decos that you may not have. It is impossible for us to create builds for every possible permutation of deco ownership, so we recommend hopping onto honeyhunterworld.com and using the same builder we use to make these sets. You can input how many of each deco you own and use the set searcher to find a nice set for yourself.
Let's start with our Lord and Savior first, the R7 KD Claw. So a few months ago, this would have been the only weapon in the video. Before the new Kjarr weapons, the Claw simply outdamaged every option in the game.
Now, if you don't have the Claw, just sub the base Odo Lance into these builds. It's still the second best raw option in the game, and yes, that means it's better than the Jho Lance. The Jho Lance needs max might to hit 100% affinity, which doesn't work very well with Lance. When you account for max might uptime, the Odo Lance outdamages it. This also means that the Jho Lance constantly loses sharpness due to not having 100% affinity, which is a big problem on Lance because it is arguably the most sharpness hungry weapon in the game. Even more than Dual Blades, because Dual Blades has innate razor sharp built into the weapon. You only lose sharpness once every 3 hits. Okay, let's start with the 0 guard set for the Claw. There are actually 2 of these. Health Augment is mandatory on Lance. This is because you will take chip damage from monsters while blocking them. Over the course of a hunt, this will really pile up. A Health Augment more than covers this issue. At a juicy 577.5 EFR with peak performance active, this build hits like a truck. This is by far the highest damage Lance option in the game, and with 100% affinity, it will never lose sharpness unless you whiff on weak points.
But because this set runs 10 units of white sharpness, you only get 20 non-weak point hits on average before you hit blue. Blue is a 10% drop in damage, and you don't want that. If you aren't confident in your aim, use this build instead. It trades 1 attack boost for a second level of handicraft. At 20 units of white sharpness, this gives you 40 weak point whiffs on average before you hit blue, which is a lot safer.
At 571.96 EFR, this build hits a little weaker compared to the previous option, but it is a lot comfier. If your aim would make you hit blue on the previous build and wouldn't with this one, then this build will give you higher damage on average.
As for Guard 1 versions of these builds, just swap out an attack deco for a guard deco on either. If you're playing in multiplayer, you'll want flinch free. We recommend dropping a flawless deco for a flinch deco. Anything else will cause you to lose more damage. Now for Guard 3, there are also two Guard 3 builds. The meta one that requires a second Claw Lance to augment, and a slightly lower damage one that only requires you have one Claw Lance.
Let's start with the meta set. This set requires you to augment a second Claw Lance for a slot augment. This slot lets you hit attack boost 4 while maintaining peak performance 3. At 550.7 EFR with peak active, this is the highest possible damage Guard 3 Lance set for the Claw.
Again, swap out the flawless deco for a flinch-free deco if you're playing in multiplayer. Now if you don't have a second claw augment, this is the set you'll run. Not having the extra slot means you'll have to make some trade-offs. You lose 2 levels of peak, but gain 2 attack boost and a damage augment.
Overall, this hits 544.24 EFR with peak active, and it does hit higher EFR when peak is not active. You can certainly make the argument that being less peak reliant means this build will hit harder over the course of a hunt compared to the other one, at least if you're taking a lot of chip damage. That being said, there is a very good use for the slot augmented Claw Lance, and that's versus Behemoth. For Behemoth, you need 3 levels of guard, guard up, and flinch free because you will be in multiplayer. The only way to fit all of this onto a build without losing a more important damage skill like non-elemental boost, crit boost, or weakness exploit is with a slot augment. At 522.98 EFR, this doesn't hit as hard as the others, but it is the highest damage set that has these mandatory skills included.
Now let's talk about elemental lances. Thanks to ATKT, we finally have elemental lances that actually beat the claw. Lance, in theory, always could have been good at element due to its fast attack speeds and low motion values, but in practice, we never had elemental weapons with high enough stats. Until now.
Let's start with the Kjarr Stream Lance. This is what the build looks like. At 471.79 EFR and 71 effective ice, this lance deals a lot of ice damage. In fact, against Diabloses, you'll be hitting for about 10% more damage compared to the Claw Lance. Very nice.
Against Diabloses, you'll want Guard 1, so just sub out a Frost Deco for a Guard Deco. The 4th level is only 2 true element, which is about 1 damage per poke on the belly, not a huge loss. Nothing you use Ice Element against requires Guard 3 or 5 except ATKT, but that's a wildly different build and we won't be covering it in this video.
Next up, we have the Kjarr King Lance. This build may look familiar, that's because it's exactly the same as the Kjarr Stream Lance. They have identical stats, except the element is switched. On Kirin, this lance hits about 8% more damage on the head than the claw does. Juicy.
Against Vaal, you'll want to run Guard 1, but also peak performance doesn't work against him. In that case, run this build. It drops the peak performance and a level of fire attack for flinch free and Guard 1.
Next up, we have the Decay Lance. I do apologize, we failed to mention this one in our ATKT Weapons to Keep video. That was my bad. It is slightly better than the Claw Lance in some matchups. Against Azure Wrath's head, it's about a 6% damage increase over the Claw.
Due to 60 less element and no slot, this is the weakest of the 3 natural white Kjarr Lances, but it's still an improvement over Claw in damage. This set is identical to the others minus the weapon slot and the 4th Dragon Deco, which it can't use anyways.
However, against 15 or lower Dragon hit zone values, the Claw will outdamage it. This of course varies based on the Sever to Dragon hit zone value ratios, but as a general rule, use the Kjarr Decay if the Dragon hit zone value is 20 or higher.
And yes, that means that Behemoth and Jho, you'll want to use Claw. Refer to our anti-Behemoth build from earlier for that. That also means there are no Guard 1 or 3 monsters we want to use this against, so no builds for that either.
And finally, we have the Kjarr Water. Again, we want to apologize, this lance is not as good as we initially thought when we made the ATKT Weapons to Keep video. The only matchup it actually beats the Claw Lance in is against Teostra. This is due to his low Sever hit zone value and very high Water hit zone value. However, the Kjarr Stream Lance beats it against Teostra as well, so for anti-TO lancing, just use the stream build we already listed or this Guard 3 version. The Kjarr Water Lance is a bit too stat hungry to actually run Guard 3 effectively. So if you don't have the Kjarr Stream Lance, just use the Claw Lance's Guard 3 sets we listed earlier. And of course, just switch out the Flawless deco for a Flinch free deco in multiplayer. And for those wondering, the Kjarr Thunder is bad. No white sharpness is a no-go. And that about does it, guys.
As always, thank you for watching the video. Let us know in the comments which lance you're excited about using. If you're looking for somebody to hunt with, check out our Discord, the Mathlos Nest. You can also follow us on Twitter, where we post updates on videos and other things that interest us. You can check me out on Twitch, where I stream Monster Hunter and other games almost every day. Shout out to Honey from Honey Hunter's World for providing the tools we use to make sets. And a huge thank you to our patrons: Broken Leah, Captain Redbeard, Charlie, Darkness, Frank, Jingrin, Ken, Lightweight, Nah, Paul, Robin, Russell, Skylar, Severind, Flashing Turtle, and Ven. We've introduced a few new tiers on our Patreon for some extra benefits that'll be going into effect in March. If you'd like to take a look at that, we appreciate everyone for the support. We're back on track for some new videos coming out soon, so if you'd like to see those, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when those come out. And until then, we'll see you in the next one. Happy hunting, hunters.
Bye!